Backlash 2004, we are 20 years removed from that event now. And back then, we're just right off of WrestleMania 20. And The Rock, Goldberg, Brock Lesnar, they're all gone. I mean, that's a lot of talent in one felt swoop. And the main takeaways from the Raw brand were that Evolution defeated The Rock and Mick Foley in a handicap match. Christian would defeat Chris Jericho and align himself with Trish Stratus. And maybe most famously, Chris Benoit became the World Heavyweight Champion, beating both Triple H and Shawn Michaels. That closed the show. And having Benoit be on top of the brand, man, that's probably something very few people ever imagined possible when the Radicals first jumped over. But, you know, WrestleMania, Madison Square Garden, it was quite a visual at the time to close the show with Benoit and Eddie Guerrero hugging and all that confetti, no?
Very special moment. For me as a broadcaster and a fan, you know, I hired those guys. So I was biased, quite frankly. Yeah, you didn't think that in WWE you would ever see a 5'8" or 9-inch world champion. Just to be honest with you. And somebody's going to say, well, JR, that doesn't make any sense. You're right, it doesn't. Talent should speak first, not their height or their weight or the size of their pythons. It's all about in-ring ability, reliability, integrity. And until the fateful day where Chris Benoit killed his family and then committed suicide, he was never a problem. Never a problem. And I thought he was a credit to the wrestling business for a long time. It's hard to maintain that philosophy after what happened, obviously. So, but it was a proud night for me because it opened the door. We haven't talked about this at all, I don't think, but it opened the door for others that were not 6'3", that you got a chance. You got a chance if you're good enough at what you do and you're the type of citizen that the company is looking to build around, then you got a chance. Because then on that same, you got Eddie there too. Eddie wasn't 6 feet.
That's right.
So we just got two great workers. They're just phenomenal performers in the ring. And I think that's where it all starts and ends. Right there's a great shot, again, on YouTube. Hope you guys will check out our YouTube channel. It's free, right, Conrad?
GrillingJR.com is your hookup for all things JR. And this is an interesting time right after WrestleMania because the business is hot. We've got 17,418 fans there. That's actually going to be the largest crowd for a WWE television taping for a few years. But as per usual, after WrestleMania, it's time to reset the table. The Rock is gone. Brock Lesnar is gone. Bill Goldberg is gone. And we've got two new champions in Eddie Guerrero and Chris Benoit. Eddie has just toppled somehow Brock Lesnar. And who would have thought Chris Benoit could beat both Shawn Michaels and Triple H in the main event? But it happened. So now it's time to reshuffle the deck, which means all the talent on SmackDown is going to rush home from Glasgow, Scotland to Detroit to appear on the draft episode of SmackDown. And Meltzer would say that none of the SmackDown wrestlers were aware of any of this until they got word in Manchester, New Hampshire, that McMahon had made the announcement on Raw and that they now had to be in Detroit. It should also be noted that when McMahon was at a WrestleMania press conference in New York, where fans were invited at Planet Hollywood, when he brought up the success of the brand extension, he was heavily booed. Let's talk about that. I know you hated not knowing what was going on in the draft, and then you're putting on another show and just not being communicated with. But did you think that the draft, if you could set yourself aside, was a value add to the business? Or when you hear people booing, does that give you different feedback?
Well, it does give you, excuse me, a little bit different feedback, but I think that, pardon me, I think that the concept, the theory behind the draft is to freshen up both rosters, Raw's roster and SmackDown's roster. I think that was always the mission. But then after a very brief while, like almost immediately, those brands became integrated. And I didn't think that was the purpose. I thought the purpose was to build two separate strong brands that on the right occasion, you could have a SmackDown versus Raw scenario. But of course, when you do that, Conrad, it means somebody's got to put somebody over. And a lot of guys, believe it or not, still have a problem putting others over, which I don't get. That's part of the business. It's like saying, well, I didn't want to wear wrestling tights. What do you want to wear? Men's Warehouse. I don't know what you're doing here. So yeah, I like the concept of it, but it got bastardized very quickly and then compromised. Quite honestly, I didn't like that, and I still don't like that.
You did an interview with the Wrestling Guys radio show, and you said you wouldn't be surprised to see Austin wrestle at least another match. And you would say that nothing's on the drawing board, but if his health continues to improve, they could do a retirement match under the right circumstances. Now, of course, we know you were saying this in 04, and you were correct, but that match wound up happening in 2022.
Yeah, well,
from the outside looking in, and I know that we're talking about a friend of yours, so I understand if there's certain confidences you can't betray.
mhm.
But for the optics from the outside looking in is that the WWE and Stone Cold Steve Austin have had an on again, off again relationship for a while. Would that be a fair statement in your opinion?
Yeah, and the reason is twofold: cash and creative.
Yeah.
Austin is probably the most particular guy as far as who he wrestles as anybody I've ever been around. He knows what he needs. He knows what he wants. He knows what will accomplish the best results as an in-ring product. And then, of course, the cash. I haven't talked to Steve in several weeks, but I'm assuming that if I was guessing, and that's all it would be right now, as I said here in Jacksonville Beach, Florida, I would say that the cash had a major role in why Austin was not at WrestleMania this year, because there was a spot there at the end where all those guys are getting their flowers and their props and their attaboys and getting their stuff over, et cetera, that would fit Steve perfectly. It's just, I'm guessing that unless he had a work commitment, which I'm not aware of, could have, but he would have been a great cherry on the sundae if he had been able to be there for that event.
Do you think he shows up as long as The Rock's hanging out? I mean, now that The Rock's on the board, it feels unlikely to me that he'll be back.
I don't know. I don't know if that's a big deal or not. And they get along. Both of them were very instrumental in the other's career and the growth of those careers. So I don't know if that one thing has to do with another, Connie. You might be right. I can see your logic. I just don't think it applies here on this particular situation.
I thought it was going to be a no-brainer for him to be there too, and when he wasn't, I thought there might be a little bit of Rock Austin professional. I mean, on the Austin side, I mean, make no doubt about it. Sure, The Rock enjoyed more mainstream Hollywood success, but when it came down to Mount Rushmore, biggest draw, blah blah blah, all due respect to The Rock, that was Austin's bag.
Yeah.
So Austin was a bigger star in wrestling. Rock was a bigger star on the silver screen. I'm sure both guys probably feel a certain type of way about that, but it always felt like Austin could at least jump on the phone with Vince maybe and figure something out. But now he's got another professional rival in Triple H and The Rock. I don't know. I hope that we get to see him again, because that Undertaker spot did feel like that was supposed to be the Austin spot at WrestleMania.
Yeah, it would have worked perfectly. It'd been a great pop, great way to send the audience home. They saw something that they didn't expect to see. I always think that's good. Wrestling fans love surprises. They love new, as we've said here many times. So, but I thought the end of that show was very well booked with bringing all those guys in.
Oh, yeah.
I thought it was very well booked. It was a nice surprise. I guess I felt like, in hindsight, I needed it. I needed something else to send me home happy or send me home talking. And they did that.